Welcome to part 2 of this video series. In the previous part we looked at rescuing a sculpture that I'd made lots and lots of mistakes on and using various different materials to create some clothes for the sculpture. In this part of the video I'm going to look at creating some steampunk gadgets and gizmos to add to the sculpture to fully complete the piece. So the next element of this I need to make is a harness that will hold the set of wings to the model. Now this isn't going to actually function, of course. I've put a square peg in the back of the sculpture that I can actually attach the real thing to, but I want it to look like the model is really wearing some flying equipment. So I'm going to make a rig that the sculpture can wear, then the actual mechanism I'm going to make will sit on the back of it and it will look like it's attached. So the way I'm doing that is simply to cut some strips of leather to size, sew some lines through them so they look like they've been sewn together, and then glue them onto this frame. Now I've made the frame out of bent aluminium rod, and that stuff's actually really easy to use, so I find that quite useful if I'm making something that needs to be silver in colour. One easy way I've found to create scale rivets in leather is to use these sewing pins and simply to push them through the leather and to snip off the stem, leaving the head, and that leaves quite a convincing rivet. So that's what that looks like, and that's how it's going to sit on the model. One thing I do need to do though is add some eyelets into the straps so it looks like this could convincingly be a belt. So in order to do this, what I've actually done is to create a punch for myself. So I've actually machined some brass here to the correct shape so I can actually use this to punch in the eyelets into the leather. One thing I also want on this is a sort of a quick release harness. I've always liked this belt that I have on my Dead Space model, and this is a quick release from a 1/6 scale action figure. I think it looks really cool, and you can imagine if you were wearing some form of flying harness you might want to get out of it quite quickly. So I think some form of quick release on the front does make sense. So what I'm doing here is just machining some brass down to size so I can create a large brass disc that can sit on the front of the harness. So there's the model so far, and as you can see we've come some way since the foam coat that I had previously. Now this still needs some wings and a mechanism to drive them on the back. We also need some hands and probably a few other details. So turning my attention to making some wings for this, what I've got is some 5mm doweling rod, and I've got these, I don't know what they're called, sort of tube hinges. What I'm going to do is solder some brass tube over these so I can attach the doweling rod to the hinges. So there we go, I don't know how well you can see this, but that's how the wing is going to sit on the model. Now if you've got a large set of mechanical wings on your back, you need some form of engine to drive them. So what I've done here is to create a styrene panel and attach that to a piece of square brass tube which will sit into the connector on the back of the model. So what I've done is to score that with a knife to give some texture to it, and once that's all painted up it should look like it's made of wood. Now whenever I'm making something mechanical I always have a mind as to how it could work. So for this I want to actually put some motion in it. Now the final model isn't going to move, but I want people when they're looking at it to think that perhaps it could. So I think the best way to do that is to actually make something that does actually move. So that's what I've done here. I've got these laser cut cogs which I'm using to create a small mechanism which will allow these panels to move in and out. What I'm also doing is machining some brass pulley wheels, and using the exact same method I've also machined some larger aluminium wheels as well. The idea is that these are going to be driven by ropes, and as they turn they will allow the wings to flap. So what I've done is to attach some aluminium rings here which are held in place by some brass arms. The wings are going to thread through these rings and attach to the aluminium wheels that I've created. As the wheels turn it will allow the wings to flap basically. So as you can see here for a proof of concept, that's how it's going to work. As the wheel turns, the brass rod pivots in the ring there. And the panels that move are sort of basically giving the idea that these things can be adjusted in some way. So there we go, there's one flying mechanism. And what I've done here is to use something called a universal coupler on each side. These are actually used for remote control boats, but here I'm just using it as a pivot so that as the wheel turns, the arms can turn as well. And the large aluminium rings feed down to a contraption at the bottom, which could be some form of engine. So the final part is to finish off some wings, and what I've done is to buy some material that's actually intended for model sailing yachts, and I've sewn out some panels which fit into the wooden wings I've created. I thought it would be cool to add some additional steampunk devices to this sculpture as well, so what I'm doing here is creating a sort of an arm brace, which could be some form of, I don't know, super strength device or something like that. So what I'm doing is using some aluminium rings and some scale brass pieces that I've had in a box for a while to create a sort of a mechanical looking device. Now you can't make a steampunk model without some goggles, and so what I've done here is just to cut some brass down to size, and I've cut out and super glued on some thin pieces of leather to create some scale goggles. So that's it for this video series. I hope this has been useful if you're thinking about making your own models. This is quite a different approach to some of my previous projects in that I'm not really sculpting a lot of these, I'm actually scratch building it from scratch or sewing stuff together. So it's not a pure sculpture in the sort of traditional sense, but it is a multimedia sculpture as it's got lots and lots of different types of material in it. Quite a useful approach though, I think, and I can see myself using this for future sculptures as well. But anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much for watching. I'll be posting videos on future projects, so if you'd like to keep up with what's going on, please do subscribe. Alternatively, you can visit my website, which is www.thedarkpower.com, or you can find me on Facebook, just search for The Dark Power.